Carolina stared at Enrique's laptop screen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The email was still open, the cold, precise words carving into her mind like sharp blades. "I can't take this double life anymore," he had written to Mariana. "Soon everything will be resolved." The shock paralyzed her for a moment. She didn't need any more proof. There was no room for doubt. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't paranoia. Enrique had already decided to leave her behind. He just hadn't had the decency to tell her. She slowly closed the laptop and took a deep breath. The world around her felt distant, muffled by the silence that was now consuming her. For the next few days, she said nothing. No confrontation, no accusations, no questions. She just observed. Enrique came home late, left early, avoided prolonged conversations. When he spoke, his words were empty, thrown into the air without emotion. But Carolina saw everything with frightening clarity. The impatient look, when she asked simple questions, the way he subtly slid his phone across the table when messages arrived, the discomfort in his posture. He thought she was still blind, but for the first time in years, Carolina saw everything with perfect sharpness. That night, lying in bed next to a man who was no longer hers, Carolina felt something different. It wasn't sadness nor anger. It was a brutal clarity, as if all the pieces had finally fallen into place. She had always believed that love was a daily commitment, but now she realized she'd been the only one keeping that promise. While she was building, he was quietly tearing everything down. Their marriage had been dead for a long time. She just hadn't signed the death certificate yet. The next morning, she no longer woke up early to prepare his coffee, nor did she ask Enrique if he needed anything before leaving. She just watched. The lump in her throat was gone, and the fear of being alone had vanished. In its place, a new thought settled. He might be ready to leave her, but it would be on her terms. She would not be the rejected wife. She would not be the one who begs, who waits for an explanation that would never come. No, this time it would be different. Carolina began preparing in silence. There was no rush, no impulsiveness. Every move was calculated, every detail meticulously planned. First, she reviewed the house documents, the joint accounts, the investments she had always managed alone. Enrique never cared about these things. He thought she just liked control. Little did he know that now, that control would be his downfall. Meanwhile, nothing changed in their daily routine. She continued acting as usual, taking care of the children, responding to friends' messages, engaging in small talk. But inside, something was growing. A strength that did not come from anger, but from the certainty that she would no longer be just a disposable piece in the life of a man who never valued her. Every word Enrique spoke, every fake smile, every rehearsed touch only reinforced her decision. That Friday, Enrique arrived late, as always. The scent of perfume that wasn't hers lingered in the air as he walked into the bedroom and casually placed his phone face down on the nightstand. Carolina no longer felt a knot in her chest, only the confirmation of what she already knew. But instead of confronting him, she simply cast a brief glance in his direction, saying nothing. The silence that once suffocated her was now her greatest weapon. He didn't notice. He was convinced she would never react. The next morning, Carolina left early. She went to the bank, organized documents, and made discreet visits to lawyers. Meanwhile, Enrique carried on with his routine, oblivious to the fact that the foundation of his life was being dismantled piece by piece. She had a plan, and every step she took brought her closer to her freedom. When she returned home, she found him in his office, distracted, completely, unaware of the storm forming right in front of him. Carolina looked at the man she had once loved and realized the fear inside her was completely gone. She had nothing left to lose. That night, Carolina finally slept well. For the first time in months, she didn't wake up startled, didn't stare at the ceiling in silence, trying to understand where everything had gone wrong. She already knew the answer, and more than that, she knew exactly what she was going to do. This wasn't about what Henrique wanted anymore. It was about what she was willing to allow. On Monday morning, as he rushed out the door for work, Carolina took action. Her lawyer had everything prepared, a carefully crafted strategy to ensure she walked away with what was rightfully hers. More than that, to make sure Henrique couldn't escape the consequences, she transferred important documents, froze certain accounts, and gathered evidence. Every signature, every transaction, every tiny detail that once seemed insignificant now played a crucial role in sealing her victory. By late afternoon, Carolina was sitting in the living room when Henrique arrived. He didn't even notice her at first, too busy typing something on his phone. She watched him for a moment, not with sadness, but with the certainty that this was a man who never imagined his world could crumble beneath him. When he finally looked at her, he found a gaze that was different, steady, unshaken. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm, without hesitation. Henrique sighed, irritated. "Not now, Carolina. I had a long day." But she didn't move, didn't look away. Then, before he could walk upstairs, she tossed an envelope onto the table. The sound of paper hitting the wood echoed through the room, and his expression shifted. First, mild annoyance, then confusion, and finally, when he opened the envelope and saw what was inside, the color drained from his face. Henrique flipped through the documents with trembling hands. Bank transfers, incriminating emails, records of payments he thought were well hidden. Everything was there, organized with a precision he never imagined Carolina was capable of. The silence that had once worked in his favor was now his worst enemy. He let out a weak, almost nervous laugh. "What is this, Carolina?" She crossed her arms, watching him with the serenity of someone who had already won. "This is you, finally being backed into a corner," she said, her voice steady. Henrique looked around as if searching for an escape, but there was none. He had always prided himself on being in control, on manipulating situations in his favor. Now, he was the one who was trapped. "If you want to get out of this without things getting ugly, you're going to do exactly what I say," Carolina continued, her voice low but firm, carrying the weight of years of silence. Henrique let out a deep breath, trying to regain control of the situation, but nothing he could say would change what was in front of him. Carolina wasn't the woman he could ignore anymore. She had him cornered, and he knew it. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice lower, almost cautious. Carolina leaned forward slightly, keeping her gaze locked on his. "I want a divorce. On my terms." She slid another document across the table. "You sign this now. No disputes, no dragging things out, no making this harder for me. If you do, I keep these files to myself, and you can walk away with what's left of your dignity." Henrique frowned as he read through the divorce papers. She would keep the house, primary custody of the kids, and a fair share of their assets. Nothing more than what she deserved. But what really unsettled him was her composure. He had expected tears, pleading, desperation. Instead, she was an immovable force. For the first time, he realized he had completely underestimated her. Henrique let out a nervous chuckle, shaking his head. "And what if I don't sign?" His attempt to sound in control was pathetic even to himself. Carolina remained unfazed. She reached for another envelope, opened it slowly, and pulled out copies of emails and bank statements. "Then this goes to your company, and to Mariana as well. Let's see how she feels knowing her great love might lose everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Henrique looked at the papers, then at Carolina. For the first time, he truly understood what was happening. He had lost. Carolina wasn't here to negotiate, to beg for respect, or to cling to the remnants of a broken marriage. She had already made her decision, and nothing he said would change that. His breathing grew heavier as his eyes scanned the divorce papers. With no way out, he picked up the pen. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the only thing filling the room. Enrique signed page after page, his expression hardened, but unable to hide his discomfort. Carolina just watched, unhurried, unaffected. When he finished, he shoved the papers toward her with a sharp movement. "There, now you have what you wanted." She took the documents and carefully placed them in her bag. Then she stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked toward the door without looking back. Just before stepping out, she paused and said, her voice firm and final, "What I wanted, Enrique, you never knew how to give me. But now, I have exactly what I need." Without another word, she stepped through the door, leaving behind not just a cheating husband, but a man who, for the first time, understood the weight of the silence she had endured for so long.